The thing about interstellar civilization, as it turned out, was that it ran on the same fundamental principle as a high school cafeteria. Everyone knew their place, and stepping out of line was social suicide. The galactic community had spent roughly 12,000 years establishing a pecking order so rigid it made Diamond look like Play-Doh, and they were quite proud of this achievement. At the top sat the architects, beings of pure energy who transcended physical form and spent most of their time being insufferably philosophical. Below them cascaded a carefully structured hierarchy of species, each slotted into their appropriate tier based on technological advancement, cultural sophistication, and, let's be honest here, how many wars they'd won. Humans had joined this cosmic country club approximately 70 years ago, and the establishment was still deeply uncomfortable about it. See, Earth was what the galactic community politely termed a death world, which was bureaucratic speak for a planet that actively tries to murder everything living on it. Most species evolved on garden worlds, where the biggest threat was whether the local fruit might give you indigestion. Humans evolved on a planet with weather patterns that could go from pleasant sunshine to city-destroying tornado in about 20 minutes, where the ocean was full of things with more teeth than seemed architecturally necessary, and where even the plants had developed a taste for blood. This made humans unusual. They had bone density that could crack Kevlar, redundant systems for damn near everything, and a pain tolerance that other species found genuinely disturbing. They could eat things that would kill a Vrelnian stone digger, survive temperatures that would liquefy a Korvathi ice former, and they healed from injuries that would leave most species as decorative paste on a bulkhead. Evolution on Earth wasn't a gentle process of adaptation. It was a 12-round cage match with entropy, and humanity had won on points. The problem was that most species didn't want to acknowledge this. Sure, humans were tough, but they were also new, loud, and annoyingly democratic about everything. They hadn't earned their place through millennia of cultural refinement. They'd just shown up one day with fusion drives held together with optimism and duct tape, announced they were open for business, and started acting like they belonged. It was tacky. It was presumptuous. It was working, which made it worse. Nexus Station Theta 7 was a perfect microcosm of this galactic awkwardness. The station floated in neutral space at the intersection of 7 major trade routes, a massive ring of steel and ceramic that housed roughly 40,000 beings from 30 different species. It was neutral ground, governed by the Merchant Council, which meant the normal rules of interspecies diplomacy were replaced by the much simpler rules of commerce. Don't damage the merchandise, pay your docking fees, and if you're going to start a fight, take it to the designated areas where broken furniture could be billed to your account. The main concourse was 3 kilometers of shops, restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues wrapped around the station's inner ring, with a transparent ceiling that showed the rotating stars beyond. Species-appropriate atmosphere was maintained in different sections, with buffer zones where the air mixtures transitioned. It was here that the galaxy's various peoples mixed, traded, argued, and generally proved that you could take beings from 1,000 different worlds. And they'd still find reasons to be petty about parking spaces. Today's lesson in interspecies relations was about to be taught by 2 individuals who'd never met, but were on an intercept course as inevitable as gravity. Vex Thor of the Cathari was having what he considered a productive afternoon. He'd intimidated a Palaxian merchant into lowering his prices, insulted a Vrelnian pilot's ship in 3 different languages, and was currently working on his 4th confrontation of the day. The Cathari were a species from a high-gravity world where evolution had produced beings that looked like someone had started designing a rhinoceros, decided it wasn't angry enough, and added more horns and attitude. They stood roughly 7 feet tall, massed about 400 pounds of muscle and reinforced bone, and had a cultural philosophy that boiled down to might makes right, and we've got plenty of might. Vexithor was considered large, even by Cathari standards, and he'd built a comfortable life in the station's gray market security services. Need someone intimidated? Vexithor was your being. Need someone who asked too many questions to stop asking? Vexithor could help with that. Need someone to stand behind you looking menacing while you conducted questionable business? Vexithor had a very competitive rate structure. What Vexithor particularly enjoyed was reminding humans of their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Oh, sure, the Deathworld apes were durable, but durability wasn't the same as warrior prowess. The Cathari had been fighting wars when humans were still figuring out fire. They had martial traditions that dated back 6,000 years. They understood combat in ways these primitive newcomers couldn't comprehend. The fact that humans had some natural advantages didn't make them warriors. It made them durable prey. Vexithor had made a sport of finding humans on the station and testing them. Nothing technically illegal, of course. Just aggressive posturing, invasion of personal space, perhaps a shove that could be claimed as accidental. Most humans backed down. The few who didn't learned quickly why Cathari had a reputation. In the past year, Vexithor had sent 3 humans to the station's medical bay. He considered it a public service, really. Someone had to remind these apes that Deathworld didn't mean warrior world. His entourage today consisted of 2 younger Cathari, Dren and Korix, who followed him through the concourse like remora following a shark. They laughed at his jokes, echoed his insults, and generally made him feel appropriately important. This was the natural order of things. The strong led, the weak followed, and everyone knew their role. That's when Vexithor spotted her. The human woman was moving through the crowd with the efficient grace of someone who knew exactly where she was going and had no time for obstacles. She was shorter than him. Most beings were. Probably around 5'10" by human measurement, with a lean, athletic build that spoke of functional strength rather than aesthetic muscle. Dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, tan skin that suggested Earth's equatorial regions, and clothing that was worn but well-maintained. Cargo pants with actual cargo in the pockets, a fitted jacket that had seen some repairs, and boots that had logged serious kilometers. She was pulling an anti-grav pallet loaded with sealed cargo containers, heading toward the docking ring where the independent hauler ships berthed. Perfect. Another Deathworld ape. Vexithor announced loudly enough for nearby beings to hear. Several turned to watch. Confrontations were free entertainment, and Vexithor had a reputation. Someone let their pet off the leash. The woman didn't react, just kept walking. This was expected. Humans often tried to avoid confrontation, mistaking cowardice for wisdom. Vexithor moved to intercept, positioning himself directly in her path. I'm speaking to you, ape. On my world, lesser beings show respect to their betters. The woman stopped, but not in the way Vexithor expected. There was no fear in the pause, no uncertainty. She simply halted her movement and looked at him with the expression of someone who'd found an unexpected obstacle. Annoying, but manageable. Move, she said. One word delivered in a flat tone that suggested this was both a request and the only warning she planned to give. Her accent was interesting. Australian, if Vexithor's database was correct. The humans from that Earth region had a reputation for being particularly difficult to intimidate. Something about their entire continent being a death world within a death world. He dismissed the thought. Reputation was just marketing. Move? Vexthor laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. You're in civilized space now, ape. You don't give orders. You ask politely. The woman tilted her head slightly, and something in her eyes shifted. They were dark brown, almost black, and they assessed Vexthor with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating a problem. Not a threat, a problem. The distinction was subtle, but significant. I've had a long day, she said, her voice still flat. I've been hauling cargo for 16 hours. My ship's enviro system is making a noise that's either going to be a simple fix or cost me 3 months' profit. And I haven't eaten anything that wasn't freeze-dried in about a week. So I'm going to say this one more time, real clear. Move. Dren and Korix moved up beside Vexthor, expanding their presence. A small crowd was gathering now, beings backing up to give the confrontation space while staying close enough to watch. This was how it always went. Public humiliation was more effective than private violence. Or what, Deathworlder? Vexthor let the word drip with contempt. You'll report me to station security? Cry to your embassy? He reached out and shoved her cargo pallet, hard enough to send it sliding backward several meters. Oops, accident. These things happen in crowds. The woman watched the pallet slide away. She didn't react to the shove itself, didn't flinch or get angry. She just watched her cargo move, calculated the distance, and then looked back at Vexthor. You just damaged my cargo, she said, still in that flat voice. Those containers are magnetically sealed, but they've got delicate merchandise inside. If you just broke something, I'm going to be very disappointed. Disappointed? Vexthor repeated the word like it was hilarious. What are you going to do about it, ape? Challenge me? He spread his arms in a gesture of mock openness. Please, give me a reason. Something changed in the woman's posture. It wasn't dramatic, no aggressive stance, no obvious preparation for violence. She just settled slightly, weight redistributing, and suddenly she looked less like a tired cargo hauler and more like something that had been disturbed from rest. A reason? She said quietly. Yeah, I think I can manage that. She moved forward, not toward the pallet, but toward Vexthor. It wasn't a charge or an attack, just a deliberate closing of distance. She stopped about 2 meters away, well within his reach, but not quite in contact range. Here's the thing about Deathworlds, she said. And now there was something in her voice beyond flatness. A dark humor, maybe, or just the sound of someone who'd made a decision and was comfortable with it. They don't make you tough because you fight other species. They make you tough because you fight everything, every day. The weather, the wildlife, the plants, the bacteria, all of it. You wake up and the planet tries to kill you, and you survive it. And then you do it again the next day. She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. It was the smile of someone sharing a joke that nobody else would find funny. So, when some rock-headed idiot from a world where the biggest danger is probably tripping over a pebble wants to throw down, that's not scary. That's not even interesting. That's just Tuesday. Vexthor felt something unfamiliar stir in his gut. Not fear. Cathari didn't do fear. But uncertainty, maybe. Doubt. This human wasn't responding correctly. She should be backing down or getting emotional or making threats she couldn't back up. Instead, she was just matter of fact. He dismissed the feeling. Words were words. Action was truth. Big talk from a small ape, he said, and reached out to shove her the way he'd shoved the pallet. She moved. Later, Vexthor would struggle to explain exactly what happened. One moment his hand was reaching for her shoulder, the next, she'd shifted sideways, and his hand caught nothing but air. Before he could recover, her hand clamped onto his extended arm, not grabbing at him, but locking onto a specific pressure point just above his elbow. Pain shot through his arm, bright and immediate. And then she was pulling him forward while her leg swept his. And suddenly Vexithor was experiencing the novel sensation of being off balance. He caught himself before falling, yanked his arm free and swung at her. A proper Cathari strike, powered by muscle and momentum. She ducked under it, close enough that his fist actually brushed her hair and drove her own fist into his midsection. The impact should have been negligible. She was smaller, lighter, with less reach and leverage. It should have felt like being punched by a child. It felt like being hit by a hydraulic press. Pain exploded across Vexthor's torso, sharp enough to make his vision blur. He staggered back, gasping, and realized two things simultaneously. First, she'd hit him in the solar plexus with surgical precision. Second, she'd only used one hand, and she wasn't even breathing hard. The crowd was murmuring now, excited. Vexthor heard his name, heard speculation, heard the tone shift from, "This'll be quick," to, "Wait, what's happening?" Pride was a dangerous thing. Pride made you stupid. Vexthor had built his reputation on knowing when to back down from a losing situation. But pride was also a Catharia virtue, and backing down in front of a crowd, from a human, after he'd started the confrontation? Unacceptable. He roared. A proper Cathari battle cry that resonated in his chest cavity and came out at a frequency designed to trigger fear responses in most species, and charged. The woman didn't retreat. She angled herself, shifted her weight, and as Vexthor came in like a freight train, she moved like water. His momentum carried him past her, and she helped it along with a hand on his back, adding just enough force to send him stumbling into a nearby cargo crate with a sound like a gong. "You're strong," she said conversationally, as Vexthor pulled himself off the crate. "Probably about 3 times stronger than me, pound for pound. Your bone density's impressive. Your muscle attachment points are solid, and you've got about 80 pounds of mass advantage. On paper, this shouldn't even be close." She was walking toward him now, and not rushing, just closing distance with that same matter-of-fact determination. "But here's what you don't understand about Earth," she continued. "We don't just fight big predators. We fight small ones, venomous ones. Disease, infection. Our bodies learn to keep fighting through damage that would kill most species. We learn to fight smart because we couldn't always fight strong. And we learn that sometimes the best way to take down something bigger than you is to let it defeat itself." Vexthor lunged again, this time trying to grapple, to use his weight and strength in close quarters where her speed wouldn't matter. He got his arms around her, lifted her off the ground, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, locked her arm around his neck, and squeezed. The chokehold was technically perfect. Vexthor had studied combat extensively. He recognized a rear naked choke when he was in one. But knowing what was happening didn't help him escape it. She had all her weight on him now, hanging off him like a backpack, and her arm was across his throat, cutting off blood flow to his brain. He tried to pull her arm away, and found that despite his strength advantage, the angle was wrong. She had leverage, he had panic. "Here's something else about humans," she said, her voice calm in his ear as his vision started to darken at the edges. "We're endurance hunters. We don't sprint down prey. We follow it, for days if necessary, until it's too exhausted to run anymore. And then, when it can't fight back, we finish it." Vexthor's legs were weakening. His fingers scrabbled at her arm, found no purchase. The crowd was making noise now. Not cheering, exactly, but that shocked sound of beings watching their assumptions get shattered in real time. "You're going to go to sleep now," the woman said, almost kindly. "When you wake up, you're going to think about whether starting fights is really how you want to spend your afternoons. And if you're smart, you'll remember that there are about 3,000 humans on this station, and every single one of us is from Earth." The world went gray, then dark. Vex Thor's last conscious thought was that he'd made a terrible miscalculation. When Vex Thor woke up, he was lying on the concourse floor with a station medic scanning him. The medic was a Palaxian, a species known for their medical expertise and their inability to hide their emotions. The Palaxian looked deeply amused. "Cathari superior physiology," the medic said, not quite successfully hiding a smirk. "No permanent damage. Just unconscious for approximately 2 minutes. Very embarrassing for you, I imagine." Vex Thor sat up, head pounding, pride shattered. The crowd had dispersed mostly, though several beings lingered, holding up their recording devices. Great. This would be on the station's social networks within the hour. Dren and Korix were standing nearby, looking uncertain. They hadn't helped. Of course they hadn't. They'd watched their boss get strangled unconscious by someone half his size, and apparently decided that discretion was the better part of continued employment. The woman was gone. Her cargo pallet was gone. She'd finished the fight, collected her stuff, and left like this was just another task checked off her list. "Where is she?" Vex Thor growled. "The human woman?" The medic consulted his datapad. "Riley Chen, independent hauler, registered out of the Earth ship Wandering Albatross. She completed her cargo delivery approximately 90 seconds after you lost consciousness. Currently in Bay 17, according to station tracking." Riley Chen. Vex Thor committed the name to memory, though whether for revenge or to avoid her in the future, he wasn't entirely sure. "Did you know," the medic continued, clearly enjoying himself, "that humans have a tradition called mixed martial arts? It's fascinating, really. They spend their recreational time teaching each other how to incapacitate opponents using techniques from dozens of different combat systems. Not for war, not for defense, just for sport, for fun." The medic leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Ms. Chen has markings on her records indicating she participated in this tradition for approximately 8 years before becoming a cargo hauler. Underground fighting leagues, specifically. The kind where serious injury is expected rather than avoided. She has a 1-loss record of 37-2. Both losses came from illegal strikes that fractured her bones, and she still finished both fights before seeking medical attention." Vex Thor felt something cold settle in his gut. "Why are you telling me this?" "Professional courtesy," the medic said cheerfully. "I've treated 6 other beings who made the mistake of challenging Miss Chen since she arrived on this station 4 months ago. You're the first one who didn't require bone regeneration. I thought you should know that you got off lightly. She was in a good mood today." The medic stood, packing away his equipment. "My bill will be sent to your account. Try not to pick fights with Deathworlders. The paperwork is tedious." Bay 17 was in the station's outer ring, where the independent haulers docked their ships in a chaotic arrangement that resembled a 3-dimensional parking lot. The ships ranged from sleek corporate vessels to rust-bucket freighters held together by prayer and spot welds. The Wandering Albatross was somewhere in the middle. A 50-meter cargo hauler with asymmetric hull plating that suggested extensive repairs and modifications, atmospheric entry scars, and the worn but functional aesthetic of a ship that actually worked for its living. Riley was in the cargo bay, running diagnostics on her containers when her ship's AI chimed. Visitor approaching the airlock. Cathari signatures. 3 individuals. Elevated stress hormones detected. Riley sighed. Of course. Tell them I'm not interested in round 2. They claim they wish to speak, not fight. Voice analysis suggests sincerity mixed with significant embarrassment. Fine. Let them to the cargo bay, but keep the inner doors locked. And if they try anything stupid, vent this section and bill them for the air. A few minutes later, Vex Thor stepped into her cargo bay, looking significantly less imposing than he had earlier. His 2 companions hung back near the door, clearly ready to run. Vex Thor himself looked like someone who'd been forced to swallow something unpleasant, which, technically, he had. His pride. Human Riley Chen, he said formally. I have come to apologize. Riley didn't look up from her diagnostic pad. Offer compensation for the damaged cargo? Admit that maybe starting fights in public spaces is a poor life choice? Yes. That got her attention. She looked up, genuinely surprised. Seriously? Vex Thor's jaw worked like speaking was physically painful. The Cathari I value strength. You demonstrated superior combat skill. You could have caused permanent injury when I was helpless, but you chose not to. This shows restraint, which is also strength. I misjudged you. You misjudged all humans, Riley corrected, but her tone wasn't harsh. Let me guess. You thought we were all tough but stupid? Strong bodies, weak minds. Dangerous but controllable. Vex Thor's silence was confirmation enough. Riley set down her pad and leaned against a cargo container. Here's the thing nobody seems to get about Earth. Yeah, it's a death world. But that doesn't just make us physically tough, it makes us smart. You think we survived on just muscle? On a planet where everything wants to eat you, where the weather can kill you, where invisible bacteria can drop you in hours? We survived because we learned to adapt, to think, to use every advantage we could find. She gestured at the station beyond the hull. Every species out here looks at humans and sees the Deathworld part. The tough bones, the redundant organs, the pain tolerance. But they miss the part where we had to be clever enough to outsmart predators with better teeth, faster legs, and sharper claws. They miss the part where we learned to work together because solo humans died young. They miss the part where we spent 10,000 years developing every fighting style we could imagine, because violence was always an option, and we needed to be good at it. I understand that now, Vex Thor said quietly. Do you? Riley studied him. Because here's what I think. I think you've built your reputation on being the biggest, scariest thing in the room. And that works great until you meet something scarier. But being scary isn't the same as being strong. And being strong isn't the same as being skilled. She walked toward him, and to his credit, Vex Thor didn't back away. I'm not special, Riley said. I'm not even particularly tough by human standards. I'm just a cargo hauler who used to fight for money because the pay was better than factory work. There are 3,000 humans on this station, and most of them could probably do what I did to you. Some could do it faster. Some could do it without even breathing hard. She stopped in front of him, looking up at the larger being without fear. So here's my advice, Vex Thor of the Cathari. Stop picking fights. Stop testing people. Stop trying to prove you're the toughest thing around. Because sooner or later, you're going to find something tougher, and you might not walk away from that one. And if I don't? There was no challenge in the question, just curiosity. Riley smiled, but it was a tired expression. Then you'll learn the hard way. But I'd prefer you didn't. Because despite appearances, I don't actually enjoy hurting people. I just refuse to be a victim. She turned back to her diagnostics. Compensation for the damaged cargo is 1,500 credits. You can transfer it to my ship's account. After that, we're square. Vexthor processed this. It was a reasonable sum, not enough to be punitive, but enough to acknowledge the damages. And if I refuse? Then I file a complaint with station security. We both waste 3 hours giving statements. You probably get banned from the neutral sections for 60 days, and we both end up paying lawyer fees. Riley shrugged. Or you just pay the 1,500 and we call it a learning experience. Vexthor made the transfer from his wrist device. A chime indicated Riley's acceptance. One question, Vexthor said as he turned to leave. Why did you not humiliate me further? You could have made it worse. Riley looked at him for a long moment. Because I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to haul cargo, make money, and maybe have a quiet drink at the end of the day. You started the fight, I finished it. That's all it needed to be. A warrior's philosophy, Vexthor said, something like respect in his voice. Nah. Riley went back to her pad. Just a tired hauler's common sense. The news spread through Nexus Station Theta 7, the way gossip always does. Quickly, enthusiastically, and with increasing embellishment. By evening, beings across 30 species had seen the footage of the fight, and the commentary sections were experiencing what could only be described as a philosophical crisis. The Cathari community was particularly unsettled. If one of their best street fighters could be taken down by a mid-tier human cargo hauler, her own words, what did that say about their vaunted martial superiority? What did that say about the entire social hierarchy they'd built their culture around? The human community, meanwhile, was mostly just amused. Riley had bought them all breathing room with that fight. Every human on the station would find themselves subject to slightly less harassment, slightly more respect, slightly more caution. It wouldn't last forever. But it was a nice change. At the Meteor's Rest, one of the station's more disreputable bars, Riley sat at the counter nursing a beer that was almost but not quite the right temperature, and pretending not to notice the various beings trying to sneak glances at her. The bartender, a Vrelnian named Koth, who'd seen pretty much everything in 40 years of serving drinks to spacers, slid her a second beer without being asked. On the house, Koth said, for the show. I didn't do it for entertainment, Riley muttered. But she took the beer. No, you did it because some idiot pushed you too far. But the entertainment value was undeniable. Koth polished a glass with 3 of his 6 tentacles, while operating the taps with 2 more. Word is, 3 different martial training centers have contacted you about teaching positions. Not interested. Also word is, Vexthor has left the station, took a contract on a mining world in the outer reaches, somewhere far away where nobody saw the fight. Riley felt something twist in her gut. Not sympathy exactly, but an understanding of what it cost to have your self-image shattered. Good luck to him. Good luck to whoever starts a fight with him next, you mean. He'll be either smarter or meaner from this. Maybe both. Koth set down the glass. What about you? Sticking around? Got 3 more cargo runs contracted. Then I'm heading coreward. There's work near the Delvani systems, fewer questions about where merchandise came from. Riley took a long drink. Quieter. You could make a lot more money staying here. Your reputation is something I never wanted. Riley cut him off, but not unkindly. I'm not a fighter anymore, Koth. I did that life I walked away, and I'm not interested in going back. Today was just what had to happen. Nothing more. Koth nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd heard 1,000 stories and knew when not to push. Fair enough. But for what it's worth, you did every human on this station a favor. Things will be easier for them now. Yeah, well. Riley stared into her beer, watching the bubbles rise. Someone had to. Later that night, as Nexus Station Theta 7 rotated slowly against the starfield and 40,000 beings went about their business, Riley stood in the observation deck near her docking bay and looked out at the galaxy. She was tired, sore in places she'd forgotten could be sore, and fairly certain she'd aggravated an old rib injury from the fight. Tomorrow she'd have to finish her cargo checks, file her departure paperwork, and start the prep sequence for her next run. But tonight, she just stood there, one human among trillions of beings scattered across thousands of worlds, and thought about how strange it was that you could travel light years from home and still find the same stupid problems. Bullies and victims, hierarchies and challenges, pride and consequences. The technology changed, the species changed, but the fundamental patterns stayed the same. Somewhere on this station, Vex Thor's former associates were probably recalculating their positions. Somewhere, other beings were watching the fight footage and updating their threat assessments about humans. Somewhere, the cosmic social hierarchy was experiencing a minor tremor as beings realized that maybe, just maybe, they'd misjudged the Deathworld apes. Riley didn't particularly care. She wasn't here to overturn galactic civilization or prove humanity's worth. She was here to haul cargo, make enough money to keep her ship running, and eventually, someday, save up enough to retire to some quiet colony world where the biggest excitement was whether the local harvest would be good this year. But if she had to break a few noses along the way to get there, well, that was just the cost of doing business. Behind her, the station hummed with life, and beyond it, the galaxy turned in its endless dance. Humans had joined that dance only recently, still learning the steps, still finding their place. But they were here now, and they weren't going anywhere. And maybe that was the real lesson of the day. Not that humans were the toughest or the strongest or the scariest. Just that they were here, and they'd survived worse than anything the galaxy had thrown at them. And they'd keep surviving, because that's what Deathworlders did. They endured. Riley finished her beer, crushed the container in her hand with slightly more force than necessary, and headed back to her ship. Tomorrow was another day, another cargo run, another chapter in the ongoing comedy of trying to make a living among the stars. And if someone wanted to start trouble along the way, well, she'd deal with that when it happened, with